Welcome, dear listener, to another gentle journey through the shadows of history. Picture yourself now as the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, painting the Nile in shades of amber and gold. The air carries the sweet fragrance of blooming lotus and the distant sound of reed pipes. While somewhere along these ancient waters, lovers once whispered promises that would echo through millennia. Tonight, we journey into a world where romance was woven into the very fabric of civilization, where the art of seduction flourished alongside the pyramids and temples that still stand today. In ancient Egypt, love was not left to chance or impulse, but cultivated with the same careful attention given to the flooding of the Nile or the alignment of the stars. Here, in this land of eternal mysteries, we will discover how ordinary people transformed simple encounters into elaborate courtships, how queens wielded romance as skillfully as they did political power, and how the very objects of desire, perfumes, jewelry, music, became sacred tools in an ancient dance of hearts. If you want to help me to keep doing these videos, please consider subscribing to the channel and hit the like button. It motivates and helps me keep bringing videos in this format. If you'd like to hear about a specific topic, leave a comment below, and I'll show you in the video when your topic is chosen. Imagine yourself now settling into the curved hull of a small papyrus boat, its woven fibers still holding the warmth of the afternoon sun. The vessel rocks gently beneath you as your companion guides it through the shallow waters near the riverbank, where clusters of sacred lotus flowers rise from the murky depths like offerings to the sky. The paddle dips silently into the water with each stroke, creating small whirlpools that catch the dying light and scatter it like liquid gold across the surface. You can feel the soft sway of the boat matching the rhythm of your heartbeat, lulling you into that timeless state where the boundary between dreaming and waking begins to blur. The lotus flowers surround you now, their pink and white petals unfurling in the cooling air, releasing a fragrance so pure and intoxicating that the ancient Egyptians believed it carried the breath of the gods themselves. Each bloom rises on its sturdy stem, emerging pristine from the dark waters below, symbol of rebirth and eternal beauty that decorated the walls of tombs and temples for 3,000 years. Your fingers trail through the water, disturbing tiny silver fish that dart between the lily pads, while overhead, the first stars begin to appear in the deepening purple sky. This is how courtship often began along the Nile, with quiet boat rides through the marshlands, where lovers could speak in whispers without the watchful eyes of family or neighbors. The art of seduction in ancient Egypt was never hurried, never crude, but unfolded like these very lotus petals, slowly, deliberately, with an understanding that true attraction required patience and skill. As your boat drifts deeper into the reed beds, you might imagine the conversations that once took place in vessels just like this one, where a young scribe might recite poetry he had composed for his beloved, or where a merchant's daughter might playfully splash water at her suitor, her laughter echoing across the marsh like the call of sacred ibis. The Egyptians understood that romance was theater, and the Nile itself served as their grandest stage, its endless supply of romantic settings and its promise of privacy away from the dusty, crowded streets of the cities. Your boat companion speaks in low, melodious tones about the day's events, perhaps the morning's fishing, with the repairs needed on the family's grain storehouse, or the upcoming festival of Hathor, goddess of love and beauty. But beneath these ordinary topics lies a deeper current of meaning. For in ancient Egypt, even the most mundane conversation between potential lovers carried layers of significance and subtle invitation. The choice of words, the timing of glances, the seemingly accidental brush of fingers as the lotus stems are gathered tall, of these formed part of an intricate dance that could span months, even years, before reaching its conclusion. As the last rays of sunlight fade and the boat continues its gentle journey through the marsh, you begin to understand why the ancient Egyptians elevated courtship to an art form. In a civilization that valued harmony, balance, and beauty above almost all else, love could not be left to chance or treated with casual indifference. Instead, it was cultivated like the crops that grew in the rich black soil of the Nile Delta, tended with care and attention until it bloomed as magnificently as the sacred lotus flowers that now surround your small vessel in the gathering. Darkness, the water beneath your boat, holds mysteries dating back 4,000 years, when the first pharaohs ruled from Memphis and Thebes, and when young people, just like yourself, would drift through these same marshes under the ancient arts of attraction and romance. The lotus blooms close gradually as night approaches, their petals folding inward to protect their precious centers until the sun's return. And in this natural rhythm, you can sense the ebb and flow of desire itself, the advance and retreat, the revelation and concealment that made Egyptian courtship such a sophisticated and enduring art. Your breathing grows deeper now as the boat finds a sheltered spot among the reeds, where the water barely moves and the only sounds are the gentle lapping against the hull and the distant call of night birds beginning their evening songs. Here, in this timeless sanctuary, you can almost hear the echoes of ancient conversations, the soft laughter of lovers who once knew these waters, the whispered promises and sweet declarations that have been carried away on countless evening breezes, but somehow still linger in the warm, flower-scented air. The small oil lamp your companion lights flickers against the darkness, casting dancing shadows across the water and illuminating the lotus flowers that surround you like a living constellation. This was how romance bloomed along the Nile, not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with these quiet, intimate moments where two hearts could find their rhythm together, where conversation could flow as naturally as the great river itself, and where the very act of sharing silence became a form of communication more profound than any words. As your boat continues its peaceful drift through the marshlands, you begin to understand that you are not merely observing ancient Egyptian courtship, but experiencing its very essence, the unhurried patience, the appreciation for natural beauty, the understanding that true connection required time and space to develop, like the lotus flowers that must sink deep into the mud before they can rise toward the light. The gentle motion of the water beneath you, the fragrance of the blooms, and the soft murmur of your companion's voice all combined to create that perfect environment where love could grow and flourish under the watchful eyes of the eternal stars. The night deepens around your small vessel, but you feel no urgency to return to shore, no restless desire to hurry toward any destination other than this moment of perfect tranquility. This is the gift the ancient Egyptians understood, that the journey of the heart was often more beautiful than any arrival. That the art of seduction lay not in conquest, but in the gradual unveiling of souls, like lotus petals opening to reveal their golden hearts in the morning sun. Here, drifting among the sacred flowers of the Nile, you have found your way into the very center of that ancient understanding, where time moves like honey and every moment holds the possibility of wonder. As your boat glides silently through the dark waters, the gentle current carries you toward the shoreline, where small clusters of houses nestle among date palms and sycamore trees. The oil lamp's flickering light reveals reed fishermen preparing their nets for the dawn catch, their movements as rhythmic and practiced as temple dancers performing sacred rites. You can smell wood smoke drifting from cooking fires where families gather to share their evening meal, the aromatic blend of roasted fish, fresh bread, and wild herbs, creating an atmosphere of warmth and domestic tranquility. This is where the art of seduction truly flourished in ancient Egypt, not in grand palaces or elaborate temples, but in these quiet neighborhoods where ordinary people lived out their careful rituals of attraction and courtship. Your companion guides the boat toward a small wooden dock, its weathered planks worn smooth by countless feet and the constant lapping of the river. As you step onto the shore, your sandals sink slightly into the soft mud that the Nile deposits each year during its life-giving flood. That miraculous inundation that transforms the desert into fertile farmland and provides the foundation for one of history's most enduring civilizations. The mud between your toes feels cool and rich, pregnant with possibilities. Much like the romantic encounters that began on evenings, just like this one, when young Egyptians would meet at the river's edge to begin their elaborate dances of desire. The path from the dock leads through a grove of date palms, where the night air carries the sweet scent of ripening fruit and the gentle rustle of palm fronds moving in the evening breeze. Imagine walking this ancient pathway, feeling the packed earth beneath your feet, while fireflies dance among the leaves like tiny stars that have fallen from the sky. The Egyptians believed that love itself was a form of magic, a divine force that could transform the most ordinary moment into something sacred and eternal. And as you follow this moonlit path, you begin to understand how they wove romance into the very fabric of their daily lives. Your journey takes you past small houses where oil lamps glow in windows and families gather in courtyards to enjoy the cooling air after another scorching day under the relentless Egyptian sun. Through half-open doorways, you glimpse scenes of domestic life that have remained unchanged from millennia mothers nursing babies. Children playing with carved wooden toys, fathers repairing fishing nets, or sharpening tools for tomorrow's work. But look more closely, and you might also see young women applying kohl around their eyes with delicate bronze applicators, or young men carefully braiding flowers into their hair, preparing for the subtle rituals of courtship that will unfold. As the night deepens, the art of seduction in ancient Egypt began long before lovers actually met, with elaborate preparations that could take hours or even days. Young women would bathe in the Nile at dawn, scrubbing their skin with natron salt until it gleamed like polished bronze, then anoint themselves with precious oils scented with myrrh, frankincense, and lotus blossoms. They understood that attraction was as much about fragrance as appearance, and they wore their perfumes like invisible garments, creating an aura of desirability that would linger in a room long after they had departed. The application of kohl was an art form in itself, with different techniques for creating various effects, some bold and dramatic for festival days, others subtle and mysterious for quiet evening encounters. Young men were equally meticulous in their preparations, spending considerable time and effort on their appearance before venturing out to meet potential romantic partners. They would shave their faces and heads with bronze razors, cleaving only carefully sculpted eyebrows and sometimes small braids of hair as decorative elements. Their bodies were oiled and perfumed just as carefully as the women's, and they wore linen garments that were bleached to brilliant whiteness, a color that represented purity and refinement in Egyptian society. The wealthy adorned themselves with gold jewelry, armbands, collar necklaces, to rings that caught the light and drew attention to their movements. As you continue along the path, you encounter a group of young people gathered beneath a large sycamore tree, its broad leaves providing shelter from the night dew. They are engaged in one of the most popular courtship activities of ancient Egypt, the recitation of love poetry, an art form that flourished along the Nile and produced some of the most beautiful romantic literature in human history. Carefully, and you might hear verses that speak of lovers as beautiful as the morning star, or hearts that dance like fish in the marsh, or lips that are sweeter than honey mixed with wine. This poetry was not merely entertainment, but a sophisticated form of emotional communication that allowed young people to express their feelings in socially acceptable ways. The recitation of poetry served multiple purposes in Egyptian courtship rituals. It demonstrated education and cultural refinement, qualities that were highly valued in potential marriage partners, while also providing a safe way to express passionate feelings without crossing the boundaries of propriety. A young man could declare his love through ancient verses without seeming too forward, while a young woman could respond with equally passionate poetry without compromising her reputation. The ability to memorize and recite these poems with proper emotion and intonation was considered an essential skill for anyone hoping to navigate the complex world of romance successfully. Music was another crucial element in the Egyptian art of seduction, and as you linger near the gathering beneath the sycamore tree, you hear the gentle strumming of a lyre accompanied by the haunting melody of a wooden flute. These instruments were not merely sources of entertainment, but tools of emotional manipulation, capable of stirring feelings of longing and desire in even the most resistant hearts. Egyptian musicians understood the power of rhythm and melody to bypass rational thought and speak directly to the emotions, and they used this knowledge to create atmospheric soundscapes that enhanced every aspect of romantic encounter. The musicians themselves often played important roles in courtship rituals, serving as intermediaries between potential lovers who were not yet ready to communicate directly. A young man might hire a skilled harpist to play beneath his beloved's window, conveying messages of devotion through carefully chosen melodies. A young woman might request specific songs at family gatherings, knowing that her intended would understand the hidden meanings in the lyrics. Music became a secret language of the heart, allowing lovers to communicate across crowded rooms or through the walls of neighboring houses without speaking a single word aloud. Dancing was perhaps the most sensual element of Egyptian courtship culture, a physical expression of attraction that could convey more than hours of conversation. The dancers you observe beneath the sycamore tree move with fluid grace, their bodies swaying in time to the music like reeds bending in the wind. Their movements are both controlled and abandoned, following ancient choreographic patterns that tell stories of desire, separation, reunion, and eternal love. Each gesture carries meaning, each turn of the head or extension of the arm, contributing to a complex narrative that unfolds through movement rather than words. The dance of seduction in ancient Egypt was never crude or overtly sexual, but rather a sophisticated form of physical poetry that suggested rather than displayed, that hinted rather than revealed. Dancers wore flowing linen garments that moved with their bodies, creating an illusion of constant transformation, while their jewelry caught the lamplight and created patterns of light and shadow across their skin. The effect was mesmerizing, hypnotic, designed to capture the imagination and awaken desires that might otherwise remain dormant. As the evening progresses and you continue your journey through this ancient landscape of love, you begin to understand that seduction in Egypt was never a single act or isolated encounter, but rather a way of living that permeated every aspect of daily life, from the careful application of cosmetics each morning to the selection of garments and jewelry. From the memorization of poetry to the practice of dance steps, young Egyptians devoted considerable time and energy to perfecting the arts of attraction. They understood that love was too important to be left to chance, too precious to be approached without preparation, too sacred to be treated with anything less than the reverence they showed their gods. The path you walk has been traveled by countless lovers over the millennia, each generation adding their own stories to the great river of human passion that flows as eternally as the Nile itself. Your footsteps echo those of ancient Egyptians who understood that the art of seduction was really the art of transformation, the magical process, by which two separate hearts learned to beat in harmony. Two separate souls discovered their connection to something larger than themselves. Here, beneath the eternal stars that have witnessed 4,000 years of human longing, you find yourself becoming part of that ancient tradition, carried forward by the gentle current of time itself. As you move deeper into the heart of this riverside community, the sounds of evening life create a symphony of domesticity that has remained unchanged since the time of the pyramids. The gentle grinding of grain in stone querns mingles with the soft conversation of women preparing tomorrow's bread, while children's laughter echoes from hidden courtyards where families gather to escape the lingering heat of the day. The air carries a dozen different fragrances: baking bread, brewing beer, burning incense, and the ever-present perfume of lotus blossoms that seems to permeate every corner of Egyptian life. This sensory tapestry forms the backdrop against which the most intimate human dramas unfold, where young hearts learn the ancient rhythms of attraction and desire. Your journey brings you to a small marketplace that remains active even as darkness settles over the land. Its stalls lit by flickering oil lamps that cast dancing shadows across displays of goods, both practical and luxurious. Here, beneath canopies of woven reed matting, merchants offer the tools and treasures that fuel the Egyptian art of seduction: precious perfumes in delicate alabaster vessels, mirrors of polished bronze that reflect beauty back upon itself, cosmetics ground from minerals and plants that transform ordinary faces into works of divine artistry. The vendors themselves are part of the romantic economy, understanding that their customers are not merely buying objects, but purchasing the means to transform themselves into creatures worthy of love and desire. Watch as a young woman examines a collection of coal pots, each one carved from a different stone and designed to hold the dark powder that will rim her eyes with mystery and allure. The merchant, an elderly woman whose own eyes still bear traces of ancient beauty, explains the subtle differences between coal made from galena and that ground from burnt almonds, how one creates a softer, more approachable look, while the other suggests danger and exotic passion. This is not merely a commercial transaction, but an initiation into the secrets of attraction, a passing down of knowledge from one generation to the next that ensures the continuity of romantic traditions that stretch back to the dawn of civilization. The young customer's fingers trace the smooth surface of an alabaster perfume jar, feeling the coolness of the stone and imagining how the precious oil within will feel against her skin, how its fragrance will announce her presence in a room before she even speaks. The perfumes of ancient Egypt were not merely pleasant scents, but complex compositions that told stories about their wearers, mysterious blends of myrrh and frankincense for those who wished to seem exotic and unattainable, light, floral combinations of lotus and lily for those who preferred to suggest innocence and purity, rich, heavy mixtures of sandalwood and amber for those bold enough to advertise their passionate natures without shame. In the stall beside the cosmetics vendor, the jeweler displays his wares on squares of fine linen, his piece catching the lamplight and throwing back tiny rainbows of reflected brilliance. The jewelry of ancient Egypt served purposes far beyond mere decoration, functioning as a form of silent communication that could convey status, availability, and romantic intentions to those educated enough to read the coded messages. A woman wearing gold armbands with lotus motifs announced her association with Hathor, goddess of love and beauty, while silver anklets that chimed softly with each step suggested a playful, approachable nature that invited conversation and flirtation. The young men browsing the jewelry stalls move with the careful deliberation of hunters selecting their weapons, understanding that the wrong choice of ornament could send unintended messages or fail to create the desired impression. A collar necklace of gold and turquoise might suggest wealth and sophistication, but could also intimidate potential partners who felt themselves unworthy of such magnificence. A simple band of silver, on the other hand, might indicate modesty and good character, but could fail to capture the attention of someone seeking excitement and passion. The art lay in finding the perfect balance, the combination of ornaments that would attract the right kind of attention while deterring unwanted advances. Your wandering through the marketplace brings you to a section dedicated to musical instruments, where the tools of romantic expression hang from wooden pegs or rest in cushioned baskets like sleeping creatures waiting to be awakened. The lyres, with their curved arms and taut strings, seem to whisper even in silence, while the reed flutes promised melodies that could melt the hardest heart or inspire the most reluctant dancer to movement. These instruments were not merely sources of entertainment, but extensions of their players' souls, capable of expressing emotions too complex or too dangerous to voice in ordinary speech. A young man tests the tension of a lyre's strings, his fingers moving across them with the practiced touch of someone who has spent countless hours mastering the intricate relationship between pressure and tone. His selection of this particular instrument is not random, for in Egyptian culture, its different instruments carried different meanings and attracted different kinds of romantic attention. Cool. The lyre was associated with refinement and education, suggesting that its player was worthy of a sophisticated partner who could appreciate subtle musical expression. The sistrum, with its metal rattles that created hypnotic rhythms, spoke of religious devotion but also of sensual abandon, while the simple reed pipe suggested rural innocence and a connection to the natural world. As you observe these careful preparations for romantic encounter, you begin to understand that seduction in ancient Egypt was never a spontaneous act, or rather a performance that required extensive rehearsal and meticulous attention to detail. Every element, from the choice of perfume to the selection of jewelry, from the memorization of poetry to the practice of dance, steps contributed to a carefully constructed persona designed to attract and captivate. This elaborate artifice was not considered deceptive or false, but rather a form of respect for the beloved, a demonstration that they were worthy of such careful preparation and devoted attention. The marketplace gradually empties as the night deepens, but the lessons in romance continue in more private settings. Following a narrow alley between mud brick houses, you discover a hidden courtyard where several families have gathered to celebrate a daughter's coming of age, the ritual that marks her transition from childhood to potential wife and mother. The courtyard is decorated with garlands of flowers and lit by dozens of small oil lamps that create a warm, intimate atmosphere perfect for the romantic education that forms an essential part of such celebrations. The young woman at the center of the ceremony sits on a low wooden stool, while the older women of her family apply cosmetics with the reverence of priestesses performing sacred rites. Each brushstroke that applies kohl around her eyes, each dab of red ochre on her lips, each careful arrangement of her hair carries the weight of tradition and the promise of future happiness. This is not merely a makeover, but a transformation that will prepare her to take her place in the complex world of adult relationships. Armed with the knowledge and skills her mothers and grandmothers have accumulated over generations, the men of the family watch from the periphery of the courtyard, but their presence is not passive or decorative. They too are receiving education in the arts of attraction, observing how their female relatives transform an ordinary girl into a creature of beauty and power, learning to appreciate the time and effort that such transformations require. Young men who witness these ceremonies develop a deeper understanding of feminine mystery and a greater respect for the elaborate rituals that govern romantic interaction, knowledge that will serve them well in their own future courtships. As the ceremony progresses, the assembled women share stories and advice that form an oral tradition of romantic wisdom passed down through countless generations. They speak of the importance of patience in developing relationships, of the necessity of maintaining mystery even in marriage, of the ways that small gestures and subtle signals can communicate more effectively than grand declarations or expensive gifts. This wisdom is not recorded in any papyrus or carved on any temple wall, but lives in the memories and experiences of women who have successfully navigated the treacherous waters of ancient romance. The young men listening to these conversations learn equally valuable lessons about the expectations and desires of their potential partners. They discover that true seduction requires understanding rather than conquest, that the most attractive quality a man can possess is the ability to listen and respond to subtle emotional cues. that patience and persistence are far more effective than aggression or possessiveness. These lessons sink deep into their consciousness, becoming part of the foundation upon which they will build their own romantic relationships in the years to come. The celebration continues long into the night, with music and dancing that grows more elaborate as inhibitions fade and wine loosens tongues that might otherwise remain silent. The dances performed at such gatherings are not the formal temple choreography witnessed at religious festivals, but more intimate expressions of desire and longing that speak directly to the heart. Couples move together in patterns that suggest both the union and separation of lovers, their bodies communicating in a language older than words, more honest than speech. The wine served at these celebrations is not merely alcohol, but a sacred substance that the Egyptians believed carried the power to dissolve the barriers between souls and allow hearts to speak their true desires. Made from grapes grown in the fertile delta and aged in clay jars sealed with beeswax, this wine carries the essence of the land itself. The accumulated sunshine and river water that nourish all life along the Nile. To share wine with another person is to participate in a communion that transcends the physical world. Acknowledge the divine spark that connects all living beings in the eternal dance of creation. As the evening reaches its climax, the young woman who has been the focus of the ceremony rises to perform her first adult dance, moving with newfound confidence and grace that announces her readiness to enter the world of romantic possibility. Her movements are both innocent and knowing, suggesting the complex duality that characterizes Egyptian attitudes toward sexuality and desire. She is pure but not naive, attractive but not available, mysterious but not unapproachable, a perfect embodiment of the contradictions that made Egyptian women the most celebrated beauties of the ancient world. The assembled guests respond to her performance with appreciation that goes beyond mere aesthetic pleasure, recognizing in her movements the continuation of traditions that have sustained their community through floods and famines, invasions and political upheavals, the rise and fall of dynasties. In her dance, they see the promise of future generations, the assurance that the arts of love and romance will continue to flourish along the Nile long after their own stories have been forgotten. This knowledge fills them with a contentment that transcends individual concerns, connecting them to something larger and more enduring than their own brief lives. As you prepare to leave this intimate celebration and continue your journey through the night-shrouded streets of ancient Egypt, you carry with you a deeper understanding of how romance functioned in this remarkable civilization. It was not a private affair between two individuals, but a community concern that involved entire families and neighborhoods in its successful cultivation. The arts of seduction were not secret knowledge hoarded by a select few, but cultural treasures shared freely among all members of society, ensuring that each new generation would be equipped with the skills and understanding necessary to find love and happiness in their own lives. The gentle murmur of the celebration fades behind you as your footsteps carry you away from the intimate courtyard and toward the broader canvas of Egyptian history, where individual stories of romance expand into legends that echo through millennia. The narrow streets gradually widen into grand boulevards paved with limestone blocks, their surfaces worn smooth by the passage of countless feet over the centuries. Oil lamps mounted on bronze standards cast pools of golden light at regular intervals, illuminating facades that grow progressively more elaborate as you approach the heart of Alexandria, that great cosmopolitan city where East met West and where the most famous love affairs in human history once unfolded beneath these same eternal stars. The very air seems different here, charged with the memory of power and passion, perfumed with exotic spices carried by merchant ships from distant lands, heavy with the weight of destinies that shaped the course of empires. This is the Alexandria of Cleopatra VII, last pharaoh of Egypt, where the ancient arts of seduction were elevated to instruments of statecraft, and where romantic liaisons carried consequences that rippled across continents and centuries. As you walk these ghostly streets, you can almost hear the echo of sandaled feet hurrying to assignations that would determine the fate of nations, the whispered conversations that sealed alliances between hearts and kingdoms alike. Your path leads you toward the harbor district, where the famous lighthouse once stood as a beacon to ships, carrying grain to Rome and returning, laden with gold and exotic luxuries that fed the insatiable appetite of the Mediterranean world. The docks extend into the dark water like fingers reaching toward distant shores, their wooden planks creaking softly under the gentle pressure of waves that have carried the hopes and fears of lovers across vast distances. It was here that ships arrived, bearing messages between separated hearts, where diplomatic missions disguised passionate longings, where the personal and political became so intertwined that historians would spend centuries trying to separate truth from legend. The warehouses that lined the waterfront contained more than grain and papyrus, more than gold and ivory and precious stones. They hold the accumulated dreams of a civilization that understood how to transform desire into destiny, how to channel the raw power of attraction into forces capable of reshaping the world. In these shadowy spaces between massive stone columns, imagine the secret meetings where plans were laid and conspiracies hatched, where a young queen learned to wield her feminine power with the same skill her ancestors had shown in commanding armies and building monuments that would endure for eternity. Cleopatra's story begins not with her famous liaisons with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony, but with her education in the ancient Egyptian arts of attraction, refined over 3 millennia and passed down through generations of queens who understood that true power lay not in force of arms, but in the ability to capture and hold the human heart. From childhood, she was trained in languages and literature, music and dance, mathematics and astronomy. But beneath all these studies lay a deeper curriculum in the management of desire, the orchestration of emotion, the delicate balance between revelation and concealment that made Egyptian queens the most formidable women in the ancient world. Picture her as a young princess in the palace corridors, observing how her predecessors had navigated the treacherous waters of dynastic politics through strategic marriages and calculated seductions. The walls around her were decorated with scenes of Hathor, goddess of love and beauty. Its divine protection extended over all matters of the heart. The palace gardens bloomed with flowers specifically chosen for their aphrodisiac properties, and their symbolic meanings in the complex language of romantic communication. Every element of her environment was designed to reinforce the lesson that love and power were not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of the same divine authority. Her education in the arts of seduction began with the mastery of her own appearance, learning to use cosmetics not merely for beauty, but as instruments of psychological warfare. The application of kohl around her eyes was an exercise in precision that rivaled the skills of master architects, creating different effects for different occasions and different audiences. For formal court ceremonies, her makeup emphasized majesty and distance, making her appear more goddess than mortal woman. For intimate negotiations with foreign dignitaries, she might choose subtler applications that suggested accessibility while maintaining an aura of mystery and power. The perfumes she wore were as carefully calculated as her makeup, custom blended by master perfumers who understood the psychological effects of different fragrances on different types of men. For Romans accustomed to simple scents, she might choose exotic combinations of Eastern spices that spoke of distant lands and mysterious pleasures. For fellow Egyptians, she could employ the traditional lotus and myrrh that connected her to the eternal traditions of her ancestors. Each perfume was a form of invisible armor, protecting her while simultaneously drawing others into her sphere of influence. But Cleopatra's true genius lay not in these surface arts. Impressive though they were, but in her understanding of how to combine physical attraction with intellectual stimulation to create bonds that transcended mere desire. She was fluent in 9 languages, allowing her to communicate with diplomatic visitors in their native tongues and demonstrating a respect for their cultures that immediately set her apart from other rulers who relied on translators and interpreters. This linguistic skill was not merely practical, but deeply seductive. For there is perhaps no greater aphrodisiac than the feeling of being truly understood, of finding someone who can share thoughts and emotions in the most intimate possible way. That her knowledge of literature was equally impressive and equally strategic, allowing her to quote poetry and philosophy in ways that revealed hidden depths of sensitivity and intelligence. In an age when most rulers were known primarily for their military prowess or administrative efficiency, Cleopatra offered something far rarer and more valuable: the promise of intellectual companionship, of conversations that could last through long nights and reveal new facets of thought and feeling with each exchange. She understood that the mind, once captivated, was far more loyal than the body. And she cultivated her intellectual attractions with the same care that other queens devoted to their physical beauty. Music was another weapon in her arsenal of seduction, and she was accomplished on several instruments, including the lyre, the sistrum, and the complex hydraulic organ that was among the technological marvels of Alexandria. But more than technical skill, she possessed an intuitive understanding of how music could be used to create emotional states, to lower psychological defenses, to establish intimacy without words. The melodies she played were not random entertainment, but carefully chosen soundtracks for specific emotional journeys, designed to guide her listeners through subtle transformations of mood and feeling that would leave them more receptive to her influence. Dancing was perhaps the most dangerous of her arts, for it required her to surrender apparent control while maintaining absolute command over the effects she created. The dances she performed at state banquets were not the folk celebrations of common people, but sophisticated choreographic narratives that told stories of desire and conquest, of surrender and domination, of the eternal dance between masculine and feminine forces that shapes all human relationships. Her movements spoke in a language older than words, more honest than diplomacy, more powerful than armies, and those who watched her dance found themselves entranced by visions of possibilities they had never dared to imagine. Yet, for all her mastery of these traditional feminine arts, Cleopatra's greatest innovation was her understanding of how to use them as foundations for deeper forms of connection. She did not seek merely to attract and captivate, but to create partnerships based on mutual respect and shared ambition. Her liaisons with powerful men were not conquests in the traditional sense, but negotiations between equals who recognized in each other the qualities necessary for great achievements. She offered not just her beauty and charm, but her intelligence, her resources, her dreams of empire and glory that matched their own. The preparation for each of her great romantic campaigns was as meticulous as any military operation, involving months of intelligence gathering about her intended targets, preferences, weaknesses, dreams, and fears. She studied their previous relationships, their cultural backgrounds, their political situations, their personal histories, building psychological profiles that would allow her to present herself in whatever guise would prove most irresistible. This was not deception, but adaptation, a demonstration of the flexibility and creativity that made her such a formidable political operator. When Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria, pursuing his rival Pompey, Cleopatra was ready for him with a strategy that had been years in the making. She understood that the great Roman general was tired of political maneuvering and military campaigns, was hungry for new experiences and fresh perspectives that could reinvigorate his aging ambitions. She presented herself not as a supplicant seeking protection, but as an exotic, equal offering partnership in adventures that could reshape the world. Her famous arrival, smuggled into his presence wrapped in a carpet, was not merely theatrical, but psychologically brilliant, demonstrating both her courage and her creativity while placing him in the position of protector and discoverer. Their subsequent relationship unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance, with each partner contributing steps to a routine that neither could have performed alone. Caesar brought military genius and political experience, while Cleopatra offered cultural sophistication and access to the vast wealth of Egypt. Together, they dreamed of an empire that would combine the best of East and West, Roman efficiency with Egyptian mysticism, practical governance with transcendent vision. Their romantic connection was inseparable from their political alliance, each reinforcing the other in ways that created a bond stronger than either passion or ambition alone could have forged. The months they spent together in Alexandria were a masterpiece of romantic theater, with Cleopatra demonstrating the full range of her seductive arts while simultaneously proving her worth as a political and intellectual partner. She organized elaborate banquets that showcased Egyptian luxury and refinement, literary salons where Roman practicality met Egyptian philosophy, hunting expeditions that tested courage and skill, river cruises that combined pleasure with serious discussions of governance and empire. Every activity was designed to deepen their connection while demonstrating her value as an ally and partner. Their Nile cruise became legendary for its combination of sensual pleasure and serious planning. They sailed through the heart of Egypt on a golden barge equipped with every luxury the ancient world could provide. The voyage was both honeymoon and strategic conference, allowing them to experience the country's wealth and beauty while discussing how its resources could be used to fuel their shared ambitions. The gentle motion of the boat, the exotic scenery, sliding past, the constant sound of water against the hull, all created an atmosphere of dreamy unreality that made even the most grandiose plans seem not only possible, but inevitable. Picture yourself now aboard that legendary vessel, feeling the ancient timbers beneath your feet as they creak softly with the eternal rhythm of the Nile's current. The barge stretches before you like a floating palace, its deck paved with cedar, planks from Lebanon, and its railings carved from ivory brought from the heart of Africa. Purple silk canopies flutter overhead, their rich fabric dyed with murex shells gathered from distant Mediterranean shores, while golden threads woven through the cloth catch the morning sunlight and scatter it in dancing patterns across the water. This is not merely a boat, but a symbol of Egyptian power and sophistication. It's designed to overwhelm the senses and demonstrate the vast resources at Cleopatra's command. The air aboard the royal barge carries a dozen exotic fragrances that blend and separate like invisible currents in the wind. Frankincense burns in bronze braziers shaped like lotus blossoms, its sweet smoke rising to mingle with the natural perfumes of the flower garlands that drape every surface. The kitchen below deck sends up aromas of roasting meat seasoned with spices from India and Persia, while the wine holds its own bouquet of aged grapes that have absorbed the essence of Egyptian soil and sunshine. These scents create an intoxicating atmosphere that seems to exist outside normal time and space, a sensory cocoon that insulates its passengers from the ordinary world and its mundane concerns. Cleopatra moves through this floating paradise with the grace of a goddess, her every gesture calculated to reinforce the impression of divine authority and feminine power. Her costume for this voyage represents the pinnacle of Egyptian fashion and craftsmanship, a gown of the finest linen, so sheer it seems woven from moonbeams, dyed with gold thread that outlines her figure while suggesting, rather than revealing it. Her jewelry has been chosen not merely for beauty, but for symbolic meaning, each piece telling part of the story she wishes to communicate about her divine heritage and her worthiness to rule an empire that spans continents. The serpent armlet that coils around her upper arm speaks of her connection to the cobra goddess Wajet, protector of pharaohs and symbol of royal power. The collar necklace of gold and lapis lazuli recreates the pattern of the night sky, positioning her as an earthly representative of celestial authority. Even her sandals carry meaning, their golden straps designed to echo the hieroglyphic symbol for life with each step she takes across the polished deck. Every element of her appearance has been orchestrated to create a total sensory experience that overwhelms rational thought and speaks directly to the deeper levels of consciousness where desire and ambition intertwine. Caesar, for his part, finds himself in an environment unlike anything he has experienced in his decades of military campaigns and political maneuvering. The luxury of the barge surpasses even the most elaborate Roman villas, but it is luxury with a purpose, designed not merely to impress, but to seduce, to create a state of mind in which the impossible becomes inevitable. The constant, gentle motion of the boat undermines his habitual need for control and firm footing, while the exotic surroundings challenge his assumptions about civilization and power, forcing him to see the world through Egyptian eyes and to imagine possibilities he might never have considered in the harsh, marble halls of the Roman Senate. The crew that operates this floating palace moves with the silent efficiency of temple dancers, their every action choreographed to contribute to the overall effect of otherworldly perfection. Servants appear with refreshments precisely when needed, then vanish like spirits, never intruding on the intimate conversations that flow between the royal passengers as naturally as the river current beneath their feet. Musicians positioned at strategic points throughout the vessel provide a soundtrack of harps and flutes that seems to emerge from the air itself, while dancers emerge at unexpected moments to perform brief interludes that illustrate themes from the ongoing conversations. The meals served aboard the barge represent more than sustenance. They are symphonies of flavor and texture, designed to create specific emotional states and to demonstrate the vast reach of Egyptian trade networks. Breakfast might feature honey from Nubian bees served with bread baked from grain grown in the delta, accompanied by fruits that have traveled from as far away as India and Persia. The wine comes from vineyards that have been cultivating grapes since the time of the earliest pharaohs, their roots deep in soil that has been enriched by countless Nile floods, their flavors carrying the accumulated essence of centuries. Lunch unfolds as an elaborate ritual of multiple courses, each one representing a different aspect of Egyptian culture and abundance. Fresh fish caught from the Nile are prepared with techniques that have remained unchanged for millennia. Their flesh seasoned with herbs grown in temple gardens and cooked in oils, pressed from olives that grow in groves, blessed by ancient priests. Roasted fowl arrives stuffed with rice and nuts from distant lands, or vegetables grown in the rich black soil of the floodplain provide colors and flavors that seem almost supernatural in their intensity and perfection. But it is the evening. Meals that truly showcase Cleopatra's mastery of seductive strategy. It's transforming the simple act of eating into a form of theater that engages all the senses simultaneously. Tables are set with vessels of gold and silver, their surfaces reflecting the lamplight and creating an atmosphere of warmth and intimacy. The food itself becomes an extension of the ongoing romantic dialogue, with each course carefully chosen to encourage conversation, to lower psychological defenses, to create the optimal conditions for the kind of deep communication that builds lasting bonds between hearts and minds. The conversations that flow between Caesar and Cleopatra during these leisurely meals range across every conceivable topic: philosophy and poetry, military strategy and administrative efficiency, the nature of power and the responsibility of rulers, the dreams and fears that drive human ambition. She demonstrates her intellectual equality, not through aggressive debate, but through subtle questions that reveal the depth of her understanding, through observations that illuminate familiar subjects from new perspectives, through stories that connect personal experience to universal truths about the human condition. As the barge drifts past ancient temples and timeless villages, Caesar finds himself seeing Egypt not as a conquered territory to be exploited, but as a partner in a grand enterprise that could reshape the known world. Cleopatra's commentary on the passing landscape serves as both history lesson and seductive narrative, revealing the vast resources and accumulated wisdom that she brings to their partnership, while simultaneously demonstrating her deep connection to the land and people she rules. Her love for Egypt becomes infectious, awakening in him a desire to protect and nurture rather than simply to possess and control. The afternoons aboard the barge often include stops at sacred sites where Cleopatra can demonstrate her religious authority and her connection to the divine forces that legitimize pharaonic power. These visits serve multiple purposes in her seductive strategy, showing Caesar the depth of loyalty she commands among her people, while also exposing him to the mystical aspects of Egyptian culture that offer alternatives to the purely rational materialism of Roman civilization. He watches her perform ancient rituals with genuine reverence, sees the way priests and people respond to her presence with authentic devotion. He begins to understand that he is not merely allying himself with a beautiful woman, but with a living goddess who embodies the hopes and dreams of an entire civilization. The evenings bring the most intimate moments of their floating courtship. As the last light fades from the western sky and the oil lamps create pools of golden warmth in the purple darkness, music becomes more personal and improvisational, with Cleopatra herself sometimes taking up her lyre to perform songs that seem to emerge spontaneously from the moment. Melodies that capture the exact mood of the evening and translate it into something that transcends ordinary language. Her voice, trained from childhood in the traditions of Egyptian music, carries emotions that penetrate directly to the heart, bypassing rational thought and creating connections that feel deeper than conscious choice. Dancing, when it occurs, takes on an almost ritual quality in this mystical setting, with movements that suggest not entertainment but communion, not performance but prayer. Cleopatra's dances aboard the royal barge are unlike anything Caesar has witnessed in Rome, where physical expression tends toward either martial demonstration or crude entertainment. These are movements that speak of spiritual transformation, of the eternal dance between masculine and feminine principles that creates and sustains the universe, of the possibility that two souls might merge into something greater than either could achieve alone. The nights aboard the barge provide opportunities for the kind of extended, uninterrupted conversation that builds the deepest forms of intimacy, without the distractions of court life or the pressures of immediate decision-making. Caesar and Cleopatra can explore each other's minds and hearts with the thoroughness of scholars, examining precious manuscripts. They share memories of childhood, dreams of future greatness, fears and vulnerabilities that they have never revealed to anyone else, gradually building the foundation of trust and understanding that transforms mere attraction into genuine love. The physical environment of the barge contributes to these intimate revelations, with its gentle motion creating a sense of floating suspension between earth and heaven, past and future, reality and dream. The constant sound of water against the hull serves as a form of natural music that encourages contemplation and confession, while the isolation from normal routines and responsibilities creates a temporary world where anything seems possible, and where the usual rules of behavior and expectation no longer apply, as the days and nights blend together in this floating paradise. Both Caesar and Cleopatra find themselves transformed by the experience. He discovers depths of feeling and imagination that his previous life of warfare and politics had never revealed, while she learns to trust in a partnership that offers genuine equality rather than mere alliance of convenience. Their relationship deepens from strategic calculation to authentic affection, from mutual exploitation to genuine care for each other's welfare and happiness. The crew and servants who witness this transformation recognize they are observing something unprecedented in the history of both Egypt and Roma romance that transcends the usual boundaries of nationality and culture. It's a partnership that promises to reshape the political landscape of the ancient world. They maintain the discreet silence that palace protocol demands, but among themselves they whisper of the possibility that they are witnessing the birth of a new kind of empire. One based not on conquest and submission, but on voluntary alliance between equals who share a vision of human potential that surpasses anything either civilization has achieved alone. The river itself seems to approve of this developing romance, providing perfect weather for their cruise. Gentle breezes that filled the silk canopies without creating discomfort. Sunsets of extraordinary beauty that framed their evening conversations in golden light. Nights illuminated by stars that seemed brighter and more numerous than usual. The ancient Egyptians would have interpreted these favorable conditions as signs of divine blessing, indications that the gods themselves approve of this union between the last pharaoh, the greatest Roman of his age. When the cruise finally ends and the golden barge returns to Alexandria, both passengers carry with them memories that will sustain their relationship through the political storms and military challenges that lie ahead. They have created together a perfect world in miniature, a prototype for the kind of empire they dream of building together, where Eastern wisdom and Western efficiency combine to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Barge becomes a symbol of their shared vision, a floating reminder that love and power need not be opposing forces, but can work together to transform not just individual lives, but the course of history itself. The years that follow the Golden Barge voyage unfold like chapters in an epic poem, each one building upon the last to create a narrative of love and ambition that stretches across the Mediterranean world. But even as Caesar and Cleopatra work to consolidate their alliance and plan their joint empire, the cruel necessities of Roman politics intrude upon their Egyptian paradise, demanding sacrifices that test the strength of bonds forged in lotus-scented chambers and moonlit river cruises. The brutal reality of Caesar's assassination on the Ides of March shatters their shared dream, leaving Cleopatra alone in Alexandria to contemplate the fragility of human ambition and the eternal struggle between love and duty that defines the lives of those born to rule in the months following Caesar's death. As civil war tears through the Roman Republic and ambitious generals vie for control of his legacy, Cleopatra retreats to the deepest chambers of her palace to mourn not just a lover, but a partner whose vision had matched her own. The rooms where they had planned their empire now echo with emptiness, the scrolls containing their shared dreams gathering, dust on tables that once hosted councils of war and whispered conferences of the heart. Yet even in her grief, the last pharaoh understands that survival requires adaptation, that the arts of seduction, which had served her so well with Caesar, must now be refined and redirected toward new targets, new opportunities to secure Egypt's independence and her own divine authority. The arrival of Mark Antony in the Eastern Mediterranean creates possibilities that Cleopatra recognizes immediately, though she also understands that this new Roman strongman presents challenges quite different from those posed by the older, more sophisticated Caesar, where Caesar had been a man of letters as well as action, appreciative of culture and refinement. Antony represents a more primal form of masculine power, drawn to spectacle and sensation, to grand gestures and theatrical displays that speak to the emotions rather than the intellect. Her strategy for capturing his attention must therefore be completely reimagined, transformed from the subtle intellectual seduction that had worked so effectively with Caesar into something more dramatic, more overwhelming, more immediately irresistible. The famous meeting at Tarsus becomes the centerpiece of this new campaign, a carefully orchestrated theatrical production that demonstrates Cleopatra's genius for understanding and manipulating the deepest psychological drives of powerful men. The golden ship that carries her up the Cydnus River represents months of planning and preparation. Every detail calculated to create maximum impact on a man who values spectacle above subtlety, display above discretion. The vessel itself becomes a floating stage set designed not merely to impress, but to overwhelm, to assault the senses so completely that rational thought becomes impossible and only wonder remains. Picture that incredible ship as it appears around the bend of the river, its purple sails billowing in the afternoon breeze like the wings of some impossible bird descended from the realm of the gods. The hull gleams with gold leaf that catches and reflects the sunlight in patterns that seem to dance across the water, while silver oars rise and fall in perfect rhythm, their blades disturbing the river's surface just enough to create tiny whirlpools that catch the light and throw it back in sparkling cascades. This is not merely transportation, but transformation, a deliberate blurring of the boundary between human ambition and divine intervention that places Cleopatra firmly in the realm of the supernatural. The decorations that adorn the ship speak in the universal language of myth and desire, drawing upon symbols that transcend cultural boundaries and appeal to the deepest levels of human consciousness. Golden Cupid's fan, the air around the vessel's magnificent figurehead, their wings creating gentle breezes that carry exotic perfumes across the water to announce the approach of something beyond ordinary mortal experience. Its mermaids trail there, hands in the river's current, their forms carved from ivory and inlaid with precious stones that seem to move and breathe in the changing light. Every surface tells part of the story. Cleopatra wishes to communicate that she is not merely a queen seeking alliance, but a goddess offering transformation to any mortal bold enough to accept her invitation. The costume she has chosen for this epical encounter represents the culmination of 3,000 years of Egyptian expertise in the arts of visual persuasion. Draped as Venus, goddess of love and beauty, she reclines on a couch that has been crafted to resemble a seashell, its curves echoing the lines of her body while suggesting the marine origins of the deity she represents. The fabric of her gown seems to shift and change color with each movement, woven with threads of gold and silver that create an illusion of liquid metal flowing across her skin. Her jewelry has been selected not for mere ornamentation, but for its ability to catch and focus light, creating a nimbus of brilliance around her. This makes her appear to glow with inner fire. The perfumes that surround her have been chosen with equal care, custom blended to create an olfactory signature unlike anything in the Roman world. The primary notes of lotus and myrrh speak of her Egyptian heritage and divine authority, while subtle undertones of cinnamon and sandalwood suggest the exotic spices that flow through Alexandria's markets from the distant corners of the earth. These fragrances do not merely please the senses, but actively work to alter consciousness, containing compounds that ancient perfumers understood could affect mood and perception, making those who breathe them more susceptible to suggestion and more open to the possibilities of transformation. The music that accompanies her approach serves as an auditory component of this carefully orchestrated assault on the senses. Instruments positioned throughout the ship to create a symphony that seems to emerge from the very air itself. Harps and lyres provide a melodic foundation that speaks of celestial harmony, while flutes and pipes add ethereal overtones that suggest the breathing of the gods. Drums maintain a rhythm that echoes the human heartbeat, creating an unconscious sense of intimacy and connection, while sistrum rattles add a hypnotic quality that encourages a trance-like state of receptivity. The servants who attend Cleopatra during this magnificent performance have been chosen and trained as carefully as actors in a sacred drama, each one representing a different aspect of the divine entourage that surrounds the goddess of love. Young men dressed as satyrs work the oars with movements that suggest both strength and sensuality, while women, costumed as nymphs, move through the ship's rigging like spirits of air and water. Their coordinated actions create a living tableau that reinforces the central theme of divine visitation, making it clear that this is no ordinary diplomatic meeting, but an encounter between the earthly and celestial realms. As the golden ship approaches the dock where Antony waits with his retinue, the psychological impact of Cleopatra's theatrical masterstroke becomes immediately apparent. The Roman crowds that had gathered to witness what they expected to be a routine diplomatic meeting find themselves instead confronting something that challenges their understanding of reality itself. The ship appears to float rather than sail. Its occupants move with the fluid grace of beings not bound by ordinary physical laws. In the very air around the vessel shimmers with possibilities that seem to transcend the mundane world of politics and warfare. Antony himself, for all his experience with military spectacle and political theater, finds himself unprepared for the totality of Cleopatra's assault on his senses and psyche. The woman who steps from the golden ship seems to exist in a different category from any he has encountered before. It's not merely beautiful, but luminous. Not simply regal, but divine. It's not just seductive, but transformative in ways that bypass conscious thought and speak directly to the deepest wells of desire and ambition that drive his imperial dreams. The banquet that follows their initial meeting becomes another carefully orchestrated component of Cleopatra's seductive strategy, demonstrating her mastery of the more subtle arts of attraction that complement the overwhelming spectacle of her arrival. The dining pavilion she has constructed for the occasion recreates a garden of earthly delights, with living trees bearing actual fruit, flowing streams of wine that cascade from hidden sources, and flowers that release fresh waves of perfume each time they are touched by the evening breeze. The very environment seems enchanted, designed to make ordinary conversation impossible and to encourage the kind of revelatory communication that builds the deepest forms of intimate connection. The feast itself transcends mere hospitality to become a form of edible poetry, with each course telling part of the story of Egypt's abundance and sophistication. Peacocks roasted and refeathered strut across tables laden with delicacies that demonstrate the vast reach of Egyptian trade networks, pearls dissolved in wine from vineyards that overlook the Mediterranean, honey gathered from flowers that bloom only in the gardens of Nubian temples, fruits that have been transported across deserts and mountains to reach this single magical evening. The message is clear. Alliance with Egypt offers access to pleasures and resources that no purely Roman achievement could ever provide. The entertainment that accompanies the meal showcases talents and traditions that have been refined over millennia, demonstrating cultural sophistication that rivals and perhaps surpasses anything Rome has achieved in its brief centuries of dominance. Dancers perform stories from Egyptian mythology with movements that seem to defy the normal limitations of human anatomy, while musicians create soundscapes that transport listeners to realms beyond ordinary experience. Poets recite verses in languages that Antony has never heard but somehow understands, their words weaving spells that make the impossible seem inevitable and the distant feel immediate. Throughout the evening, Cleopatra herself moves through this wonderland like its presiding spirit, engaging Antony in conversations that range across every conceivable topic, while gradually revealing depths of knowledge and understanding that challenge his assumptions about feminine capability and intellectual authority. She speaks of military strategy with the expertise of a general, discusses philosophy with the wisdom of a scholar, analyzes poetry with the sensitivity of an artist, demonstrating that alliance with her offers not just access to Egyptian wealth, but partnership with a mind capable of matching and perhaps exceeding his own. The wine that flows throughout the banquet has been selected not merely for its quality, but for its psychological effects. Aged blends that gradually lower inhibitions while heightening emotional receptivity and creating the optimal conditions for the kind of deep communication that transforms casual acquaintance into passionate attachment. As the evening progresses and the wine works its ancient magic, Antony finds himself sharing confidences he has never revealed to anyone else. Speaking of dreams and fears, that have remained locked in his heart through decades of warfare and political maneuvering. The culmination of this extraordinary evening comes with Cleopatra's invitation for Antony to join her on another of her legendary river cruises, this time on the Nile itself, where they can continue their conversation in the privacy and intimacy that such floating sanctuaries provide. The invitation is extended, not as a request, but as an opportunity, a chance for him to step beyond the limitations of his Roman identity and experience the kind of transcendent partnership that she had shared with Caesar, cultivated and refined by her years of experience and deepened understanding of how to forge bonds that unite hearts, minds, and political destinies. The journey down the Nile that follows represents the successful completion of Cleopatra's masterful seduction campaign, but it also marks the beginning of a relationship that will prove more complex and ultimately more tragic than her alliance with Caesar, where Caesar had been mature enough to appreciate subtlety and sophisticated enough to value intellectual partnership. Antony's more volatile nature requires constant stimulation and dramatic reinforcement, demanding a level of theatrical intensity that ultimately proves unsustainable in the face of Roman political realities and personal, psychological pressures. Yet, in the months and years that follow their Tarsus meeting, Cleopatra and Antony create together moments of passion and splendor that rival anything in human history, their love affair becoming a template for romantic excess that will inspire poets and dramatists for centuries to come. Their joint court in Alexandria becomes a center of cultural innovation and artistic achievement, where Egyptian wisdom merges with Roman ambition to create new forms of expression and new possibilities for human achievement that might have reshaped the ancient world if political circumstances had been more favorable. The tragedy that ultimately befalls their relationship serves not to diminish, but to highlight the extraordinary nature of what they achieved together, demonstrating both the transformative power of love when it operates at the highest levels of human possibility and the cruel limitations that political reality imposes upon even the most transcendent of human connections. In their rise and fall, we see reflected the eternal human struggle between the desire for transformation and the weight of tradition, between the dream of perfect union and the harsh demands of survival in an imperfect world, as their story reaches its inevitable conclusion, with Antony's defeat at Actium and the subsequent collapse of their joint empire. Cleopatra faces the ultimate test of her mastery over the arts of seduction and transformation. Unable to repeat her romantic successes with the cold and calculating Octavian, she chooses instead to transform defeat into a kind of victory. Using her final performance, the legendary death scene with the asp to ensure that her story will be remembered not as a tale of political failure, but as an eternal symbol of the power of love to transcend even death itself. The legend of Cleopatra fades into the eternal silence of the desert, but the physical evidence of Egyptian romance endures, buried beneath countless layers of sand and time, waiting for patient archaeologists to uncover the intimate details of how love flourished along the Nile. Picture yourself now in the hushed atmosphere of a museum storage room, where wooden crates contain treasures that have slept in darkness for millennia, their surfaces still bearing traces of the perfumes and oils that once adorned the bodies of ancient lovers. The air itself seems charged with possibility, heavy with the dust of ages and the whispered promises of secrets about to be revealed to modern eyes that have never witnessed such intimate glimpses into the hearts of the dead. The first artifact that emerges from its protective wrapping is a cosmetic palette carved from green schist, its surface worn smooth by countless cations of coal and paint that once transformed ordinary faces into masks of divine beauty. Your fingers trace the shallow depression where minerals were ground into powder, feeling the slight roughness left by pestle against stone, imagining the careful circular motions that prepared the weighted pigments which would frame eyes and define lips in the eternal dance of attraction. This simple object represents thousands of morning rituals, countless hours spent in careful preparation for encounters that might last only moments but carry the weight of lifelong consequences. The palette bears traces of its original contents, still embedded in the microscopic pores of the stone particles of galena that provided the deep black coal so prized by Egyptian beauties, fragments of malachite that created the green eyeshadow associated with rebirth and eternal life, traces of ochre that reddened lips and cheeks with the color of life itself. Modern chemical analysis reveals the sophisticated understanding ancient cosmeticians possessed of how different minerals affected both appearance and skin health. Their formulations, including ingredients that actually protected against the harsh desert sun while creating the desired aesthetic effects. Beside the palette lies a collection of applicators carved from ivory and bone, their tips shaped for specific purposes in the elaborate ritual of facial transformation. The finest examples show where patterns that speak of skilled hands and practiced movements, tools that have been held by fingers long since turned to dust, but whose expertise lives on in the precision of their carved surfaces. Some bear tiny inscriptions in hieroglyphic script, names of their original owners, or prayers to Hathor for beauty and success in love, transforming these simple instruments into talismans that connected their users to divine sources of attractive power. A bronze mirror emerges next from its protective casing, its polished surface still capable of reflecting images after 4,000 years buried in the sand. The handle has been cast in the shape of a lotus blossom, its petals forming a grip that fits perfectly in the human hand, while the disc itself bears decorative engravings around its edge, symbols of love and fertility, images of couples embracing, hieroglyphic texts that speak of eternal devotion and the joy of shared passion. This was not merely a tool for observing one's appearance, but a magical instrument that allowed its user to see themselves transformed, to envision the possibilities that careful preparation might create. The mirror surface retains traces of the breath that once fogged it during intimate moments of self-examination, microscopic deposits left by lips that whispered prayers and promises while gazing at their own reflection. Imagine the scenes this mirror has witnessed: young brides preparing for their wedding nights, courtesans perfecting their seductive arts, queens contemplating strategies that would determine the fate of nations. Each scratch and imperfection in its surface tells part of a story that extends far beyond mere vanity into the deepest realms of human desire and ambition. A wooden cosmetic box reveals its compartments like the chambers of a heart being opened, each section containing different tools and substances for specific aspects of the transformation ritual. Tiny silver spoons for applying perfumes, bronze tweezers for removing unwanted hair, delicate brushes made from the finest animal hairs for blending colors and creating subtle gradations of shade and tone. The wood itself has been inlaid with ivory and ebony in patterns that speak of the owner's wealth and taste, while the interior surfaces retain faint traces of the fragrances that once filled these compartments with exotic scents. The perfume bottles that emerge from deeper storage represent perhaps the most evocative artifacts of all. Their elegant forms designed to hold the liquid essence of attraction itself, carved from alabaster so thin it seems almost translucent, shaped like lotus buds or sacred animals, fitted with stoppers that have been carved to represent the faces of gods and goddesses associated with love and beauty. Some still contain traces of their original contents, dark residues that give off faint but recognizable fragrances when gently warmed, phantom scents that carry the molecular memory of passions that burned bright and brief along the banks of the Nile. Chemical analysis of these ancient perfumes reveals formulations of extraordinary complexity and sophistication, blends that combined local ingredients like lotus oil and frankincense with exotic substances imported from as far away as India and the Horn of Africa. The perfumers who created these scents understood not only which combinations pleased the nose, but also how different fragrances affected mood and perception, creating olfactory compositions that could calm anxiety, inspire confidence, awaken desire, or suggest specific qualities like purity, mystery, or passionate availability. The jewelry that accompanies these cosmetic artifacts speaks to the Egyptian understanding that attraction required coordination of all visual elements. That beauty was achieved through harmony rather than individual, spectacular pieces. Necklaces of gold and lapis lazuli recreate the colors of the sky at different times of day, while bracelets of silver and turquoise echo the shifting hues of the Nile itself. Earrings shaped like lotus blossoms or sacred beetles carry symbolic meanings that would have been immediately readable to contemporary observers, announcing their wearers' religious devotion, marital status, or romantic availability through a visual language as precise as any written text. The most remarkable pieces show signs of frequent wear, their surfaces polished by skin contact, and their clasps worn smooth by countless openings and closings. These were not ceremonial objects stored away for special occasions, but working tools in the daily practice of attraction, items that accompanied their owners through the routine encounters and special moments that make up the texture of romantic life. Tiny repairs and modifications speak of pieces loved enough to maintain rather than replace. Jewelry that became integral to their owners' identities and perhaps inseparable from their success in matters of the heart. Textiles preserved in the dry Egyptian climate revealed the importance of clothing in the ancient arts of seduction. Fabrics so fine they seem woven from air itself, dyed in colors that retained their brilliance despite millennia of burial. Linen, of incredible fineness, speaks of Egyptian mastery in textile production, while the presence of silk fragments indicates trade connections that brought the finest materials from across the known world. These garments were designed not merely to cover the body, but to reveal it in carefully calculated ways. Their translucent qualities in flowing lines creating suggestions rather than statements, mysteries rather than revelations. The surviving examples show clear evidence of careful tailoring designed to flatter specific body types and create desired visual effects. Pleating techniques that add volume in some areas while creating smooth lines in others. Strategic placement of decorative elements that draw the eye to particular features. Color combinations that enhance natural skin tones while creating psychological associations with fertility, youth, and health. These were not generic garments, but custom creations that transformed their wearers into idealized versions of themselves. Personal effects found in burial chambers provide intimate glimpses into the private lives of ancient Egyptian lovers, objects too personal to be included in official tomb inventories, but too precious to be left behind in death. Love letters written on papyrus reveal the evolution of romantic relationships from tentative, initial contact through passionate declaration to comfortable, long-term partnership. Their language ranging from formal politeness to erotic poetry that would not be out of place in modern romantic literature. One particularly touching example preserves a correspondence between a scribe and a merchant's daughter that spans several years, documenting their courtship from its cautious beginning through marriage negotiations to final union. The letters reveal not only the specific strategies they employed to win each other's affection, but also the broader social context that shaped their relationship. The involvement of families and friends, the economic considerations that influenced romantic choice, the religious beliefs that gave meaning to their eventual union. Another collection preserves the more tragic story of a love affair that ended in separation, possibly due to political circumstances or family opposition. The final letters speak of promises to meet again in the afterlife, of eternal devotion that transcends mortal limitations. of the hope that the gods will reunite souls that have been torn apart by the cruel necessities of earthly existence. These documents transform ancient Egyptians from historical abstractions into recognizable human beings whose emotional experiences mirror our own across the vast gulf of time. Musical instruments found in tomb contexts revealed the central role that sound played in Egyptian romantic culture. Harps and lyres designed not merely for public performance, but for intimate domestic settings where lovers could create private soundtracks for their developing relationships. The wear patterns on these instruments show that they were regularly played, their strings replaced multiple times, their wooden surfaces polished by countless hours of handling. Some bear personal inscriptions or decorative motifs that connect them to specific individuals or romantic partnerships. The most sophisticated examples demonstrate technological innovations that enhanced their expressive capabilities. Mechanical devices that allowed for precise tuning, resonating chambers designed to project sound effectively in different acoustic environments, decorative elements that made the instruments themselves objects of beauty worthy of romantic contemplation. These were not merely tools for making music, but extensions of their players' emotional lives, capable of expressing feelings too complex or too private for verbal communication. Games and toys found in domestic contexts reveal the playful aspects of Egyptian courtship culture. Board games that provided opportunities for flirtation and intimate conversation. Dice and gaming pieces that introduce elements of chance and excitement into romantic encounters. The rules that survive for some of these games show clear evidence of being adapted for romantic purposes, with penalties that involve forfeits of clothing or jewelry. Winning conditions that granted special privileges or intimate favors. Children's toys that prepare young people for adult romantic roles include miniature cosmetic sets, dollhouses that feature domestic scenes of married life. Musical instruments scaled down for small hands, but capable of producing real melodies. These artifacts demonstrate that romantic education began early in Egyptian society. The children were gradually introduced to the skills and knowledge they would need to navigate the complex world of adult relationships. The cumulative effect of examining these artifacts is to reveal ancient Egyptian romance, not as a distant historical phenomenon, but as a fully realized cultural system that addressed every aspect of human attraction and desire, from the most practical concerns of personal hygiene and physical appearance to the highest reaches of artistic expression and spiritual connection. The Egyptians developed approaches to love that combined practical effectiveness with aesthetic sophistication, creating a romantic culture that has rarely been equaled and never been surpassed in its comprehensive understanding of what it means to be human in the presence of another human heart. Your journey through the archaeological record now leads you deeper into the shadows of Egyptian temples, where hieroglyphic inscriptions carved into limestone walls preserve the most intimate secrets of ancient romance and symbols that have waited for millennia to reveal their meanings to modern scholars. The air in these sacred spaces carries the accumulated silence of centuries, broken only by the soft whisper of your footsteps on stone floors worn smooth by countless pilgrims who came here seeking divine assistance in matters of the heart. The walls themselves seem to pulse with hidden knowledge, their surfaces covered with texts that blurred the boundaries between religious devotion and erotic poetry, between prayers for divine favor and instructions for earthly pleasure. The hieroglyphic inscriptions that cover these temple walls represent more than mere decoration or religious propaganda. They constitute a vast library of romantic wisdom, coded in symbols that speak to both conscious understanding and unconscious desire. The scribes who carved these texts understood that love itself was a form of sacred knowledge, requiring initiation and instruction, just like any other religious mystery, And they embedded their teachings in apparently innocent religious formulas that could be read on multiple levels depending on the sophistication of the reader. Modern translation techniques reveal layers of meaning in these ancient texts that earlier scholars missed entirely. Double entendres encoded references that transformed seemingly straightforward hymns to the gods into sophisticated manuals of seduction and romance. The priests who composed these inscriptions were masters of linguistic subtlety, capable of creating texts that appeared completely appropriate for public display, simultaneously conveying information about the most intimate aspects of human relationships to those educated enough to read between the lines. One particularly remarkable set of inscriptions, discovered in a small chapel dedicated to Hathor in the temple complex at Dendora, preserves what appears to be a complete curriculum for romantic education disguised as a series of prayers and offerings to the goddess of love. The surface level of the text describes ritual procedures for honoring the deity, but careful analysis reveals a sophisticated program of instruction that covers everything from personal grooming and dress to conversation techniques and the proper timing of romantic advances. The first section of this remarkable text focuses on what it calls the preparation of the vessel, a phrase that initially appears to refer to ritual purification, but actually describes the comprehensive self-improvement program that young Egyptians were expected to complete before entering the world of serious courtship. The instructions cover not only physical cleanliness and grooming, but also intellectual development, requiring mastery of poetry, music, and dance as prerequisites for romantic success. The text emphasizes that true attractiveness comes not from surface beauty alone, but from the cultivation of what it terms inner radiance, a quality that can only be achieved through careful attention to both physical and spiritual development. The instructions for achieving this inner radiance include meditation techniques for developing emotional stability, breathing exercises for maintaining physical grace under pressure, and mental disciplines for sharpening wit and conversational ability. Subsequent sections of the Dendera text address the more practical aspects of romantic encounter, providing detailed guidance on how to read the subtle signals that indicate interest or rejection, how to time approaches for maximum effectiveness, how to maintain mystery while gradually revealing deeper levels of personality and character. The advice is surprisingly sophisticated, demonstrating psychological insights that would not be out of place in modern relationship counseling, while maintaining the poetic language and religious framework that made such explicit instruction socially acceptable. Kitchen areas in these same houses show evidence of sophisticated understanding of how diet affects physical appearance and emotional state, with specialized storage facilities for herbs and spices known to have beneficial effects on skin condition, breath freshness, and general health. Recipe collections preserved on papyrus include not only instructions for preparing food, but also formulations for beauty treatments, aphrodisiac potions, and mood-altering substances that could be incorporated into meals served to romantic interests. The integration of romantic preparation into domestic architecture demonstrates that Egyptian culture did not compartmentalize love and desire as separate from other aspects of life, but wove them seamlessly into the fabric of daily existence. Every room in these houses contains evidence of attention to romantic possibility, from bedroom furnishings designed to create optimal conditions for intimate encounter to reception, areas arranged to facilitate the kind of conversation that builds emotional connection. Private gardens attached to these homes reveal another dimension of Egyptian romantic culture, with plant selections that combine aesthetic beauty with practical utility in matters of attraction and seduction. Archaeological analysis of soil samples and preserved seeds shows that Egyptian gardeners cultivated flowers not only for their visual appeal, but also for their aromatic properties and their symbolic associations with various aspects of love and fertility. The lotus pools that grace the courtyards of wealthy homes served multiple purposes in the romantic ecosystem, providing not only beautiful settings for intimate conversation, but also sources of the perfume ingredients that were essential to Egyptian beauty practices. The maintenance of these gardens required considerable expertise and expense, indicating the high priority Egyptian society placed on creating environments conducive to romantic success. Wall paintings preserved in tomb chambers provide visual documentation of how these romantic strategies played out in actual practice, depicting scenes of courtship and marriage that illustrate the theoretical principles described in temple texts. These paintings show couples engaged in activities that demonstrate the importance of shared interests and complementary skills in building lasting relationships, from hunting expeditions that test courage and cooperation to musical performances that showcase artistic sensitivity and cultural refinement. The clothing and accessories depicted in these scenes provide detailed information about how Egyptians used visual elements to communicate romantic availability and personal qualities. The paintings show clear distinctions between garments appropriate for different stages of courtship, from the modest but attractive dress of initial acquaintance to the more revealing costumes worn during intimate celebrations, each style carefully calculated to create specific emotional responses in observers. The ritual procedures described in these magical texts, often involve elaborate theatrical elements that would have enhanced their psychological impact, requiring participants to adopt special costumes, perform specific gestures, and recite incantations at precisely timed intervals. These ceremonies created intensive experiences that focused attention and heightened emotional states in ways that increased the likelihood of romantic success through purely natural psychological mechanisms. The magical papyri fade into scholarly silence as your archaeological journey leads you away from the documented evidence toward the vast unexplored territories that still lie buried beneath the shifting sands of Egypt, where countless secrets of ancient romance await discovery by future generations of researchers. The desert stretches endlessly around you, surface rippling with heat mirages that create the illusion of distant oases, while beneath your feet lie the remnants of cities and settlements that once thrived with the sounds of laughter and music, the whispered conversations of lovers, the gentle splash of water in garden pools where courtship unfolded under star-filled skies. The wind that moves across this desolate landscape carries more than sand. In the memory of ancient rivers it bears the accumulated whispers of 4,000 years of human longing, the echoes of promises made and broken, the fragments of songs that once accompanied midnight serenades and dawn farewells. Each grain of sand that swirls around your feet might once have been part of a palace wall that witnessed legendary romances, temple column where lovers carved their names, a garden path where countless feet traced the intricate patterns of courtship and desire. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted by international archaeological teams have identified structures buried so deeply that they predate the known historical periods. Settlements from the mysterious prehistoric era, when Egyptian civilization was still taking shape, and when the fundamental patterns of romantic behavior were being established for the first time. These earlier sites hold the promise of revealing how the sophisticated courtship rituals documented in later periods actually evolved from more primitive practices, showing us the gradual development of techniques and traditions that would eventually produce the legendary seductresses and romantic poets, whose names still echo through history. The artifacts that emerge from these deep excavations tell stories that push the boundaries of our understanding about the antiquity and universality of human romantic behavior. Stone palettes for grinding cosmetics that are 8,000 years old demonstrate that the pursuit of beauty and attraction has been a central human concern since the very dawn of civilization, while carved figurines of embracing couples suggest that the symbolic representation of love has equally ancient roots in human consciousness. The preservation conditions in Egypt's dry climate have created a unique archaeological situation where organic materials that would have decayed completely in other environments remain intact after millennia of burial, providing researchers with unprecedentedly detailed information about the most intimate aspects of ancient life. Textiles that retain their original colors reveal fashion trends and aesthetic preferences that influenced romantic choice, while preserved food remains show how diet and nutrition affected physical appearance and energy levels in ways that directly impacted romantic success. Hair samples recovered from mummy wrappings provide DNA evidence that is revolutionizing our understanding of ancient Egyptian population, genetics, and marriage patterns, revealing the complex web of family relationships and romantic alliances that shaped Egyptian society at every level. Chemical analysis of these hair samples also reveals information about cosmetic treatments and styling techniques that were used to enhance attractiveness, including the use of imported dyes and oils that demonstrate the international scope of the ancient beauty industry. The technological advances that are making these discoveries possible represent a revolution in archaeological methodology that promises to unlock secrets that have remained hidden since the fall of the pharaohs. Three-dimensional imaging techniques can now reconstruct the interior layouts of buildings without excavation, revealing the spatial arrangements that facilitated romantic encounter and private conversation. Chemical sensors can detect trace amounts of perfumes and cosmetics in soil samples, mapping the invisible geography of ancient beauty practices across entire city districts. Underwater, archaeology in the Mediterranean has begun to reveal the maritime dimensions of Egyptian romantic culture, recovering shipping amphoras that once carried exotic perfumes and cosmetics across the ancient world. Their clay surfaces still bearing faint traces of the fragrances that made Egyptian women legendary throughout the classical world. These underwater excavations are uncovering evidence of a vast international trade network that supplied the raw materials for Egyptian beauty practices, connecting the Nile Valley to sources of rare ingredients in India, Arabia, and sub-Saharan Africa. The shipwrecks themselves tell stories of romantic dedication that span continents and oceans, with cargo manifests that document the enormous efforts and expenses that wealthy Egyptians were willing to undertake in pursuit of the perfect perfume or the most exotic cosmetic ingredient. One recently discovered wreck contained hundreds of sealed perfume jars that were being transported from Alexandria to Rome. Their contents apparently destined for wealthy Roman women who were attempting to recreate the legendary beauty secrets of Egyptian queens. The preservation of these underwater sites in salt water has created conditions that allow for the recovery of organic materials that would be completely lost in terrestrial environments, including wooden cosmetic boxes with their original contents intact, leather pouches containing makeup, applicators, and even papyrus documents that describe the romantic purposes for which specific cosmetic shipments were intended. Modern forensic techniques applied to mummified remains are revealing previously unknown details about Egyptian beauty practices and their effects on physical health and appearance. CT scans and X-ray analysis can detect evidence of cosmetic surgery and body modification procedures that were apparently practiced in ancient Egypt, including nose reshaping, dental work, and even primitive forms of breast enhancement that demonstrate the lengths to which some individuals were willing to go in pursuit of ideal beauty standards. Chemical analysis of mummified tissue reveals the systematic use of substances that would have enhanced physical attractiveness during life, including dietary supplements that improved skin condition, herbal treatments that maintained youthful appearance, and even primitive forms of hormone therapy that may have been used to prolong fertility and sexual attractiveness. These discoveries suggested that Egyptian medicine was far more sophisticated in its understanding of the connections between physical health and romantic success than previously imagined. Ongoing excavations at major Egyptian sites continue to yield discoveries that reshape our understanding of ancient romantic culture, with each new season bringing artifacts and inscriptions that fill gaps in our knowledge, while simultaneously raising new questions about practices and beliefs that we had thought we understood. Recent discoveries at Saqqara have revealed a previously unknown temple complex dedicated to romantic education, complete with classrooms where young people apparently received formal instruction in the arts of attraction and courtship. The temple complex includes library rooms that once contained scrolls dealing with every aspect of romantic knowledge, from basic hygiene and grooming to advanced techniques of emotional manipulation and psychological seduction, while the papyrus scrolls themselves have long since crumbled to dust. The stone shelving systems preserve enough information about their organization and its contents to reconstruct the curriculum that was taught at this ancient academy of love, adjacent to the library areas. Archaeologists have uncovered practice rooms where students apparently rehearsed dance movements, musical performances, and dramatic presentations that were considered essential elements of romantic education. The wear patterns on the floor surfaces suggest that these rooms were used intensively over long periods, indicating that the romantic education provided at this site was both comprehensive and popular among young Egyptians seeking to master the arts of attraction. The discovery of this temple complex has prompted a complete reevaluation of how romantic knowledge was transmitted in ancient Egyptian society, suggesting that what had previously been assumed to be informal family instruction was actually supplemented by formal educational institutions that provided systematic training in the sophisticated techniques that made Egyptian lovers legendary. Throughout the ancient world, satellite surveys have identified similar complexes at other major Egyptian sites, indicating that the formal teaching of romantic arts was far more widespread and institutionalized than anyone had previously imagined. These discoveries suggest that Egyptian civilization developed the world's first systematic approach to romantic education, creating institutions and curricula that ensured the continuity and refinement of seductive techniques across generations and social classes. The implications of these archaeological discoveries extend far beyond academic interest in ancient Egyptian culture, providing insights into fundamental human behavior patterns that remain relevant to contemporary understanding of romance and attraction. The sophisticated psychological techniques documented in Egyptian romantic texts anticipate many of the insights of modern relationship psychology, while the systematic approach to beauty and self-improvement that characterized Egyptian courtship culture offers models that could inform contemporary approaches to personal development and social interaction. The ongoing process of archaeological discovery in Egypt represents one of humanity's greatest opportunities to understand its own romantic heritage, to trace the development of the attitudes and practices that continue to shape human relationships in the modern world. Each artifact that emerges from the sand carries within it the accumulated wisdom of countless generations who face the same fundamental challenges of attraction, courtship, and lasting partnership that continue to define human experience across cultures and centuries. As the sun sets over the desert and the archaeological sites return to their ancient silence, the treasures they have yielded join the great library of human romantic knowledge, adding their voices to the eternal conversation about what it means to love and be loved, to desire and be desired, to find in another human heart the completion of one's own deepest longings. The mysteries that remain buried await future generations of researchers, future technologies of discovery, future opportunities to learn from the romantic masters who created along the banks of the Nile a culture of love that has never been equaled and may never be surpassed. The costumes worn by these palace dancers represent masterpieces of textile art and psychological manipulation, with fabrics and colors chosen to enhance the emotional impact of the performances while creating visual effects that linger in memory long after the dances have ended. The use of flowing materials that suggest, rather than reveal, of colors that shift and change in the lamplight, of accessories that catch and reflect illumination, all combine to create an overall effect that seems almost supernatural in its ability to capture attention and inspire desire. The games and diversions that occupied palace residents during the later hours of these gatherings have been designed to create opportunities for intimate interaction while maintaining the appearance of innocent social activity. These diversions often involve elements of skill or chance that can be used to bring specific individuals together or to create situations that require cooperation and communication between potential romantic partners, allowing relationships to develop naturally while providing plausible explanations for increased intimacy. The board games favored at court include sophisticated strategy games that require extended concentration and provide opportunities for meaningful conversation while players contemplate their moves, as well as simpler games of chance that create excitement and emotional intensity. While reducing the social barriers that might otherwise prevent intimate interaction. The rules for these games often include provisions for forfeits or rewards that can be used to escalate romantic tension while maintaining the appearance of playful entertainment. The card games and dice games that circulate through palace social circles during these evening gatherings serve similar purposes, providing frameworks for interaction that can be adapted to serve romantic objectives while offering plausible explanations for the close, physical proximity, and extended conversation that romantic development requires. The stakes involved in these games are typically modest enough to avoid serious financial consequences, while being significant enough to create genuine emotional investment in the outcomes. The private chambers that open off the main banquet hall provide opportunities for more intimate conversation and romantic development away from the public gaze. Their furnishings and decorations calculated to create optimal conditions for the kind of deep communication that builds lasting emotional bonds. These spaces serve as sanctuaries where the complex emotions generated during public social interaction can be explored and developed without constraints imposed by ceremonial requirements and public observation. The transition from public to private interaction represents one of the most delicate phases of palace romance, requiring careful timing and subtle communication to ensure that invitations to greater intimacy are offered and received in ways that preserve dignity and reputation, while allowing relationships to develop naturally. The protocols that govern these transitions have been refined over generations of court practice, creating systems that facilitate romantic development while protecting participants from social embarrassment or political complications. The deepest hours of the palace night bring the most intimate moments of courtly romance, when the elaborate social rituals of the banquet hall give way to private conversations that unfold in chambers designed for the most personal forms of human connection. The oil lamps burn lower now, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows across silk tapestries that muffle sound and create the illusion of complete isolation from the outside world, while the last strains of distant music fade into silence and leave only the gentle whisper of night breezes moving through garden courtyards where lotus blossoms release their final fragrances into the cooling air. In these precious hours between midnight and dawn, when the palace settles into its quietest rhythms and even the most vigilant servants retreat to allow their masters the privacy that intimate conversation requires, the true artistry of Egyptian romance reaches its highest expression. Here, in chambers lit only by the soft glow of alabaster lamps and perfumed by the subtle smoke of precious incense, lovers who have spent the evening navigating the complex social requirements of court life can finally speak from their hearts without fear of observation or political consequences, their words creating bonds that transcend the strategic calculations that govern so much of palace's existence. The private chambers reserved for these intimate encounters represent the pinnacle of ancient luxury and sophisticated design, with every element carefully chosen to enhance both comfort and romantic possibility, while maintaining the aesthetic standards that befit royal authority. The furniture has been crafted by master artisans who understand that objects intended for use during intimate conversation must serve psychological as well as practical purposes. Their forms and proportions calculated to encourage relaxation and openness while creating visual harmony that soothes the eye and calms the mind. The low couches that dominate these private spaces have been upholstered with the finest fabrics available in the ancient world. Their surfaces, soft enough to encourage casual reclining while maintaining sufficient firmness to provide proper support during extended conversation. The placement of these couches follows principles that have been refined through generations of romantic practice, positioned to allow intimate proximity without forcing it, to facilitate meaningful eye contact while providing opportunities for more casual interaction when emotional intensity becomes overwhelming. The cushions and pillows that adorn these intimate spaces represent months of work by the most skilled seamstresses in Egypt, their covers embroidered with symbols that speak of love and fertility, while their fillings have been selected for optimal comfort and support. Some are filled with down gathered from exotic birds whose migration patterns make their feathers rare and precious, while others contain aromatic herbs that release subtle fragrances when compressed by human weight, creating an invisible atmosphere of sensual pleasure that enhances every aspect of romantic encounter. The lighting in these private chambers has been engineered with the same precision that goes into temple construction, with oil lamps positioned to create pools of warm illumination that flatter human features while leaving enough shadows to maintain the mystery and romance that intimate conversation requires. The lamp designs themselves represent masterpieces of both artistic achievement and practical functionality, their forms echoing natural shapes like flower buds and seashells, while their flames burn with a steady consistency that prevents the distracting flicker that could interrupt meaningful dialogue. The walls of these intimate chambers bear paintings that tell stories of divine romance and eternal love. Their subjects chosen not merely for aesthetic appeal, but for their ability to inspire and guide mortal lovers toward higher forms of romantic expression. These artistic works serve as silent teachers, their imagery suggesting possibilities and techniques that might not occur to lovers focused entirely on their immediate emotional experiences, while their beauty creates an atmosphere of elevated refinement that encourages participants to conduct themselves with dignity and grace. The wine served in these private settings represents the finest selections from the royal cellars, vintages that have been aged to perfection and chosen for their ability to enhance conversation and emotional connection without impairing judgment or leading to behavior that might be regretted in the light of day. The vessels used for serving this precious wine have been crafted specifically for intimate occasions. Their size and shape designed to encourage slow, contemplative consumption, while their decorative elements provide topics for conversation and aesthetic pleasure. The music that occasionally drifts through these private chambers comes from musicians positioned at carefully calculated distances. Their melodies audible enough to provide atmospheric enhancement without interfering with conversation or creating the impression of performance for an audience. These musical selections have been chosen for their ability to evoke emotional states that facilitate intimate communication, with different compositions appropriate for different stages of romantic development and different types of personal revelation. The conversations that unfold in these intimate settings represent the highest achievement of Egyptian romantic art. Wait participants who have been educated from childhood in the sophisticated verbal techniques that build lasting emotional bonds while satisfying the intellectual curiosity that characterizes truly refined individuals. These discussions range across every conceivable topic, from personal confessions that reveal hidden depths of character to philosophical explorations that demonstrate intellectual compatibility and shared values. The skill required to conduct these intimate conversations successfully involves far more than simple honesty or emotional openness, requiring instead a delicate balance between revelation and concealment, between vulnerability and strength, between passion and restraint, that can only be achieved through years of practice and natural talent that cannot be taught. The most accomplished practitioners of this art understand how to guide conversations through subtle questions and carefully timed silences, creating opportunities for their companions to reveal themselves gradually while maintaining the sense of discovery and surprise that keeps romantic interest alive. The topics that dominate these private conversations often begin with apparently casual observations about the evening's entertainment or current political developments, but gradually evolve into more personal territory as participants gauge each other's receptivity and interest. The transition from public to private discourse requires considerable skill and sensitivity, with participants carefully monitoring emotional responses to ensure that increased intimacy is welcome rather than intrusive. The physical environment of these intimate chambers contributes significantly to the quality of conversation that unfolds within them, with acoustic properties that ensure privacy while allowing for the subtle vocal variations that convey emotional nuance and psychological complexity. The sound of fountains in nearby courtyards provides natural background that masks conversation from potential eavesdroppers, while creating an auditory environment that encourages relaxation and openness. The temperature in these private spaces is carefully regulated through architectural features that provide ventilation without creating uncomfortable drafts, while braziers filled with aromatic woods maintain warmth during the coolest hours of the night without producing smoke that might irritate sensitive throats or interfere with the appreciation of subtle perfumes. These environmental controls create optimal conditions for extended conversation, while demonstrating the technological sophistication that characterizes the best examples of palace architecture. The refreshments available in these intimate settings go far beyond simple wine and basic sustenance, including delicate foods that can be consumed without interrupting conversation, while providing the energy necessary for extended emotional and intellectual engagement. These offerings often include aphrodisiac preparations that have been refined through generations of palace practice, their effects subtle enough to enhance rather than overwhelm. Natural romantic responses. The servants who maintain these private chambers understand that their role requires absolute discretion combined with intuitive anticipation of their master's needs, appearing only when summoned, while ensuring that all necessary amenities remain available without obvious preparation or intrusive attention. These individuals have been selected and trained specifically for service in intimate settings. It's their skills extending far beyond basic household maintenance to encompass the psychological sensitivity and emotional intelligence necessary for facilitating romantic success among their employers. The protocols that govern behavior in these private chambers reflect sophisticated understanding of how intimate relationships develop and what conditions are necessary for their successful cultivation, with established procedures that protect participants' reputations while allowing for the personal exploration and emotional risk-taking that genuine romantic connection requires. These protocols have been refined through generations of court practice, creating frameworks that balance personal freedom with social responsibility. The timing of activities in these intimate chambers follows natural rhythms that have been observed and codified by generations of palace residents, with different hours of the night considered optimal for different types of romantic development and emotional exploration. The deepest hours before dawn are generally reserved for the most personal revelations and intimate physical contact, when the approaching sunrise creates a sense of urgency that encourages participants to abandon their remaining emotional defenses